Ever wonder why some of your favorite Commodore 64 games were nearly unplayable? Growing up in a small town in Texas, my Commodore 64 was my escape. I spent countless hours downloading games off of BBSs with my trusty 1670 modem. It was thrilling to get my hands on new titles, but some of these games would flicker and flash like crazy. I called it spriting out, but at 13, I had no clue it was because these were PAL games from overseas, not meant for my NTSC system. Now let me quickly break down what NTSC and PAL actually mean. These are two different video standards. NTSC is used in North America and Japan, while PAL is common in Europe and Australia. NTSC refreshes the screen 60 times per second, whereas the PAL does it 50 times. This small difference affects everything from visuals to the speed of gameplay and even the music. Now fast forward to today, and I've got a modern solution, the VIC-II Kawari chip. This amazing little upgrade lets me switch my Commodore 64 between NTSC and PAL at the press of a button, allowing us to experience these games exactly as they were intended. So join me as we dive into some classic titles comparing their glitchy NTSC versions with the smoother PAL original. If you ever struggled with those flickering screens like I did, you're in for a treat. Let's see how these games were truly meant to be played. Before we dive into Ghosts and Goblins, let me show you something special. This is the original floppy disk from Capcom USA straight out of Santa Clara, California. Now you'd think that with it being a USA release, it would have the correct NTSC version of the game, right? Well, you'd be wrong. Instead of converting the PAL version to NTSC, Capcom just slapped the PAL version onto this floppy. It wasn't just us downloading games from overseas, even companies were cutting corners, selling us games in the wrong format. Let me show you exactly what that looked like. On the left, we've got the NTSC version, flashing and flickering and all. On the right, the smooth, clean gameplay of the PAL version. Let's just see how big of difference the correct format makes. First, let's check out the differences in the music. Notice how the music plays with a faster tempo, giving the game a more intense feel. Now listen to the PAL version. You'll hear a slower, more deliberate pace, which changes the mood of the game. As you can hear, the differences in tempo really affect the atmosphere of the game. But that's not all. Let's see how these differences play out during actual gameplay. Here's Ghosts and Goblins running side by side in NTSC and PAL. Pay attention to how the gameplay speed affects your ability to react to enemies and obstacles. Notice the flickering in the NTSC version, especially during intense scenes. The PAL version maintains a smoother frame rate, making it easier to follow the action. The faster NTSC gameplay might feel more frantic, but it also makes dodging enemies more challenging, while the PAL version allows for a more precise timing. So in Ghosts and Goblins, the NTSC version might ramp up the tension, but the PAL version allows a smoother and perhaps a more manageable experience. Interestingly, I was able to get farther in the PAL version of the game than I ever did in the NTSC version. The slower gameplay in the PAL format made it easier to control, allowing me to react more effectively to enemies and obstacles. This extra time to strategize and execute moves made all the difference, especially in a game as challenging as this one. You might notice that the PAL screen looks a bit smaller compared to the NTSC screen. This isn't a mistake. It's actually due to the technical differences between the two formats. But the journey doesn't stop there. Now let's talk about another classic that 80s Tom had to battle through in NTSC when it should have been PAL. Commando. Commando's a game known not just for its intense gameplay, but also for its legendary soundtrack composed by Rob Hubbard. His music drove the adrenaline-fueled action of every mission. But how did this intensity differ between the NTSC and PAL versions? Let's start by comparing the music. First, listen to the NTSC version. Notice how the faster tempo ramps up the tension, making every moment feel more urgent. Now let's switch to the PAL version. Here the tempo slows down, giving the music a more measured, strategic feel. Now let's see how these differences in sound translate into gameplay. We'll watch both versions side by side to compare the action. Now I want to address something before we dive into gameplay. Commando did have an official NTSC release, but growing up, I didn't have that. I downloaded the PAL version off of BBS, and as a kid, I didn't realize the game wasn't supposed to be this fast or flicker so much. This video is focused on showing what it's like playing PAL games on the NTSC system. So if you're wondering why I didn't just play the NTSC version, this is why. Let's jump into the PAL experience on this NTSC hardware. In the NTSC version, the faster gameplay pushes you to move quickly, making it difficult to dodge bullets and enemies. The PAL version, on the other hand, gives you a little more time to plan your moves. The slower pace can make a big difference in a game as intense as Commando. Personally, I actually enjoyed the NTSC version of the PAL formatted Commando. The faster speed made the game more exciting for me, and I found myself playing better with the increased pace. While the flicker was annoying, the adrenaline rush and the fast music really kept me engaged. Oddly enough, I felt like my skills improved by playing the game at that speed, even though it wasn't how the game was originally meant to be played. As you can see, the differences in pacing and music between the NTSC and PAL create two distinct experiences. Whether you prefer the adrenaline rush of the NTSC or the more calculated approach of the PAL, Commando proves to be a gripping challenge in both formats. But Commando isn't the only game where these differences play a major role. Up next, we're diving into Paperboy, where the gap between the NTSC and the PAL is just as fascinating. Paperboy is a classic that had us navigating through suburban chaos, dodging everything from lawnmowers to runaway tires. But what happens when you take a game designed for PAL and run it on an NTSC system? Let's find out. First, let's listen to the NTSC version's music. Notice the upbeat tempo that adds to the chaotic feel of the game as you rush to deliver papers. And now compare that with the PAL version. Here the music slows down a bit, giving you a little more time to breathe between all those near misses. And the difference in tempo isn't just about the music, it also reflects how the entire game plays out. In NTSC, everything feels more frantic, while the PAL version lets you navigate the neighborhood with a little more control. Now, let's see how these differences play out on the actual gameplay. We'll watch both versions side by side, focusing on how the speed and visual display changes the experience. In the NTSC version, the faster gameplay makes dodging obstacles a real challenge. You need to be quick and precise to avoid losing your delivery route. Meanwhile, the PAL version, running at a slower pace, gives you a bit more time to react. This can make the game feel more forgiving and enjoyable. But there's another issue when running the PAL version on the NTSC system. You'll notice that the score at the top of the screen gets cut off. This happens because PAL games are designed for a higher vertical resolution. When you try to display that on an NTSC system, which have fewer lines of resolutions, part of the screen can get clipped, like the score in Paperboy. This screen clipping is a common problem when playing PAL games on NTSC systems. It's one of those quirks that remind us how different regional standards can really impact our gaming experience. And now that we delivered the news in Paperboy, let's gear up from some intense action in Green Beret. Just like Paperboy, you'll see how the speed and gameplay shift between NTSC and PAL can completely change the way you experience this classic title. Green Beret, also known as Russian Attack in some regions, this side-scrolling action game is notorious for its difficulty, especially in the NTSC version. For years I found it almost unplayable because of how fast and unforgiving it was, but when I switched to the PAL version, it was like night and day. Let me show you why. First, let's listen to the NTSC version's music. The fast-paced soundtrack perfectly matches the high-octane gameplay, but it also adds to the stress. Now compare that with the PAL version. The slower tempo gives the game a different vibe, making it feel like a strategic military operation than a frantic dash for survival. The music in the PAL version doesn't just sound different, it sets a completely different tone for the gameplay, which is exactly what I needed to finally enjoy this game. Now, let's take a look at how the game plays in both versions. We'll watch them side by side and you'll see exactly why the NTSC version has always been too fast for me to handle. In the NTSC version, the enemies move so quickly that you barely have time to react. It's an intense experience, but it's also incredibly frustrating. The speed makes it almost impossible to enjoy the game. The PAL version, on the other hand, slows things down just enough to give you a fighting chance. The enemies are still tough, but the reduced speed allows for more strategic play. You can plan your attacks, dodges more effectively, and actually have fun. For me, the PAL version transformed Green Beret from a game that was too difficult to even play into one that I could genuinely enjoy. It's still challenging, but now it feels fair. Like I'm in control of the action rather than just trying to survive a relentless onslaught. This is one of those cases where the differences between the NTSC and PAL isn't just about technical specs, it's about playability. The PAL version of Green Beret lets me experience the game in a way that was previously impossible in NTSC. With Green Beret under control, we're now heading into the world of the great Gianna sisters. Just like with Green Beret, you'll see how the differences between the NTSC and PAL can make or break your experience with this iconic platformer. The Great Gianna Sisters, a game that's famous for its similarities to Super Mario Bros. And infamous for its legal battles that followed, but today we're focusing on the differences between the NTSC and PAL version. While the gameplay might feel similar, the experience can be quite different depending on which version you play. Just like all the others, let's start with the music first. We'll listen to the NTSC version. The faster tempo, just like the rest, gives it that lively, frantic energy that keeps you moving. Now listen to the PAL version. The slower tempo here is closer to the game's original design, providing a more relaxed but still catchy soundtrack. The music in the PAL version captures the intended pace of the game, making it feel more like an adventure than a race. But the differences don't stop at the audio. Now let's talk about the gameplay. When playing the PAL version on an NTSC system, one of the biggest differences I noticed was the flickering of objects as I moved through the levels. Let's take a closer look. As you can see, in the NTSC version, the objects remain stable as you progress through the game, but when running the PAL version on the NTSC, there's a noticeable flickering effect, especially when there's a lot happening on the screen. The flickering can be distracting and makes the game feel less polished. It's as if the system is struggling to keep up with the game's demands, which can take away from the overall experience. For me, this flickering issue is a clear reminder of how the technical differences between the NTSC and PAL can impact the quality of a game. The PAL version might have been designed with smoother gameplay in mind, but when forced into NTSC, those imperfections start to show. Despite the flickering, the Great Gianna Sisters remains a fun and challenging platformer, but the experience is definitely different depending on which version you're playing. So there you have it. The differences between the NTSC and PAL versions of some classic games can be subtle, but they can also dramatically change how you experience the game. Whether it's the music, the speed, or visual quality, each version offers something unique. And thanks to the VIC-II Kuwari chip, I can now seamlessly switch between the NTSC and PAL, and it's brought a whole new level of excitement to these classics, just like playing them for the first time again. If you enjoyed this journey through retro gaming, make sure you check out my deep dive into other classic titles. Let's keep the nostalgia going. Boom.